So we are now going to segue into our first hack, and I'm looking at the title of it. I think there must be some kind of misprint because it says "Get government money out of higher ed," and we're in Washington D.C. How could we ever suggest that? And Future Tense has as one of its partners, sponsors, a public institution of higher education. So surely you're saying get more government money into higher ed. But to give us this first hack, we have with us Bryan Caplan. Bryan is a professor of economics at George Mason University. He is the author of, among other books, The Myth of the Rational Voter, which was really good. I read that book. And the upcoming The Case Against Education. Bryan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for coming. As a college professor, what I notice is that it's very easy to improve student learning. In fact, you can do any number of things and get very predictable results. So for example, you could take attendance. Taking attendance will give you more learning. There's research on the effect of attendance on how much students learn. Attendance actually works. If you want to get attendance up, a simple way is to take attendance and base students' grade on it, and yet outside of a few early classes with freshmen, almost no professors take attendance. Not at George Mason, not any place that I've been at. So that's one way that you could improve learning. Here's one. You could have daily class quizzes. You could actually say, if you don't pay attention today, you will have a reduction in your grade. So you better pay attention each and every day. You better not just say, yeah, whatever, I'm going to figure this out later on. Rather, you can make people pay attention at the time you're talking by saying at the end of this class, there's going to be a quiz on what I said. Right? Or here's another one. You could actually count teaching ability when you make tenure decisions. I am on the George Mason Oversight Committee for Promotion and Tenure, and everyone we denied tenure was denied tenure based upon research. No one was denied tenure based upon their teaching. I made some effort to do that, but no one listened to me. Right? So even people who seem to have the very worst teaching, the very worst teachers are considered to be well above the bar. Good enough. Perfectly fine. Now, what's striking about all these simple improvements, as well as many of the more sophisticated ones that you've been hearing about, and some of the ones you're going to hear about later today, is that most of these easy improvements fall on deaf ears. People just aren't that interested in saying, well, in doing taking attendance or doing a daily quiz or basing tenure decisions in part upon teaching ability, really basing it, not just officially basing it on teaching ability. And it's not so surprising that the suggestions for improving learning fall on deaf ears when you take a look at the labor market numbers, because it really is true that students who graduate from college on average make a lot more money than people who have not graduated from college. If you go into the academic literature, yes, of course, some of the difference in earnings between college graduates and others is due to the student's pre-existing ability. But even after you make adjustments for anything that you can measure, still there seems to be a very large financial payoff for college. Furthermore, it's not just engineering and computer science that are yielding the numbers. You can break it down by majors, and while of course the majors that you think of as being lucrative are in fact more lucrative, even the majors that you think of as not paying, actually adjusting for everything you can think of, still yield a substantial financial gain in the market. So even education majors, adjusting for everything else, seem to make about 25 or 30% more than people who didn't go to college, but did finish high school. Right. So on the one hand, you've got the puzzle that you've got these easy improvements, they're falling on deaf ears, and yet the labor market doesn't seem to care. Labor market doesn't seem to care that students aren't actually learning very much. Now, to me, this suggests that we are misunderstanding the function of college. Probably a lot of the reason why people go to college is not to learn at all. That's not what's going on. That's not what students are trying to do. Furthermore, that's not what employers are actually looking for in a large number of cases. Obviously for engineering, they care whether you've learned engineering. But what about all the people in the non-vocational majors, which is most of them? All right, so suggest that we should rethink the function of college, and this is the heart of the book that I'm writing, The Case Against Education. I say the main function of college, really the main function of formal schooling in general, is not primarily about teaching people job skills. Rather, it is a way for students to signal to the labor market that they are employable, right? And hopefully to signal that they're not just employable, but that they are awesome. There's a whole package of traits that students are trying to signal. So there's the obvious ones like intelligence. When someone does well in school, this is a sign, not a perfect sign, but nevertheless it is a predictor of greater intelligence. Now that's one that's actually pretty easy to cheaply replace. You can just do an IQ test. That might take an hour, 2 hours, cost a few $100s if you get an expensive one. So I focus actually more on some other key parts of the package. So conscientiousness, work ethic. Right? And of course, once you start thinking that a big part of what students are trying to show to employers by doing college is their work ethic, it becomes easy to understand why it is that there isn't a lot of demand for easier ways. Because if there's someone if you go to someone and you say, all right, so, or someone comes to you and says, well, I want to go and show that I'm a really hard worker. What is the easiest possible way for me to show that? Yes. Well, if you take the easiest possible way, that's showing that you are not a hard worker. If you want to show that you're a hard worker, you need to actually do quite a bit of work. Furthermore, it's not enough to say, well, I want to show that I'm a really hard worker, so I'm going to work hard for one day. Now give me a job. That's not enough either, because even a very lazy person will work hard for one day if there's a large financial payoff at the end of it for them. So you actually need to show that you're a hard worker, not only to work hard for a while, or at least to work hard enough, but to do it for a long time. Right? So it may be that you need to show that you're willing to do this work for years before you can actually convince someone that you are genuinely hard worker. But a third thing that I think is probably the real key to understanding college and education in general is students are also trying to signal conformity. In our society, you are supposed to go to college. In our society, you are supposed to finish. If you don't do these things, you have shown that you are willing to violate social conventions. And if you're willing to violate that one, why not another? And when employers are looking for people to hire, they don't want to hire someone who is going to violate normal standards of behavior, right? They want someone who, when they find out what is expected of them, try to excel within the groove that has been assigned to them. Right. So yes, you hire a computer program. You want to be a brilliant computer programmer. You don't want to be saying, well, is this thing really worth doing at all? Maybe we should dump this client. I don't like this. This project is not worthwhile. Yes, one of my best friends from undergraduate days was a brilliant computer programmer. He made a lot of money by distributing games on the early version of the internet and just asking for donations. Every day he was getting about $25. He was getting like 4 to 6 $25 checks from strangers. So imagine how many people were actually enjoying his game. Vast numbers. And yet he dropped out of his first year and was able to get work as a computer programmer, but had a lot of trouble keeping jobs because he had an attitude problem. He was an extreme nonconformist. All right. So a lot of what you're really doing in higher education and in education in general is you are jumping through hoops. You are doing things that you're supposed to do, trying to do them well in order to impress employers when you're done. Right? And a key part of the conformity, of course, is actually finishing. Right, so on the panel, people are talking, well, is finishing overrated? Well, employers are very concerned about someone who says, well, yeah, I did a year of college, but I thought finishing was overrated. Well, maybe you think that following our expectations would also be overrated. Of course, imagining this conversation is actually getting way ahead of ourselves, because probably the person who didn't finish college isn't even going to get an interview. Rather, employers get 300 applications for a job. Step one is they look for any possible reason to not give you an interview. And once they're down to maybe 30, that's when they start the interviewing process. So if you haven't met the paper requirements, you probably aren't even getting a chance to put your foot in your mouth and say things that will make your employer think, well, we don't want to hire that guy. All right. Another way of thinking about the signaling model, or a key part of the signaling model, is that it suggests that the idea of sending more people to college in order to raise their income, it really suffers from a fallacy of composition. The classic fallacy of composition, of course, is imagine we are all sitting here at a concert. Now suppose that any one person in this room wants to see better. What can one person do at a concert in order to see better? Stand up. Therefore, it follows, as night does day, that if everyone stands up, everyone can see better, right? Wrong. Right. The signaling model suggests that the financial benefits of college are very much like that. If you go to college, you make yourself look better compared to other people. You make yourself a more attractive employee. This is likely to improve your chances of getting a job and the pay of whatever job you get. But if everybody does this, if everybody goes to college, then it no longer serves this function. Rather, what this means is that if you want to show off in a world where everyone goes to college, what do you have to do? Get a master's degree. When everyone has a master's degree, what do you need? You need a PhD. When people talk about how the economy's technologically changed, one thing that's quite striking is when the Department of Labor has actually over time assessed what kinds of skills are required for different jobs to actually do different jobs. They've been doing this for at least 40 years. The main thing they find is that the main thing that's changed is not so much what the job requires as what is required to get the job. So there are many jobs which don't require any more skill today than they did 40 years ago. The jobs have barely changed, and yet the required educational credentials to even get an interview to get the job have gone up. So your usual number is that while the average worker now is maybe 2 more years of education than 40 years ago, only about 20% of this is due to the change in the kinds of jobs that people do. Almost all of it, the remaining 80% is because in changing requirements for what's expected to get the job in the first place. So it's the difference between what you need to do the job versus what you need to get what you need to get the job, and it's really what you need to get the job that has changed as education has risen, rather than what you need in order to do the job, which is much more stagnant than people want to realize. And people in this room are in the innovative parts of the economy. There's a lot of parts of the economy that are fairly stagnant and have been for quite a while. All right, now if you accept the story that a lot of what's going on in college is signaling, that's really the main function of it. The reason why people aren't interested in figuring out in actually applying methods of improving learning is that it's not about learning anyway. Once you are willing to buy this story, then there is an uncomfortable implication for someone like me who teaches at a public university, which is, what happens when, in a signaling world, right? When signaling is the main function of college, what happens if you make it more affordable? What happens if you make it easier to do? What happens if you build more universities so it requires less of a commute? Well, of course, there's the obvious answer, was that, more people go to college when you throw more money at it. Yes, but then when more people go, what happens? And in the signaling model, the answer what happens is, not only do you have more college, you also need more college. Right? What happens when more people acquire the credentials is the credential means less, and therefore it really is very much like the fallacy of composition of saying if everyone stands up, everyone can see better. If college becomes more affordable and easier for people to do, of course, more people do it, but at the same time, there is the indirect effect of raising expectations from employers. Now, if college were indeed giving people a lot of useful job skills, then you say, people go or get more money, people acquire more job skills, they're better at doing stuff, they get paid more, society's richer, makes sense. On the signaling model, though, education is primarily redistributive. The main thing you're doing is not actually increasing how much you're going to contribute to the economy. The main thing that you're changing in college, rather, is your slice of the pie. You are changing how seriously people take you. You are going to get, if you have talent, you are more likely to get rewarded for that talent. But in terms of what you actually deliver to the world, not changing. Right? So then what is changing? Like, how is it possible if a bunch of extra people go to college, total production doesn't rise, but all the extra college goers get a raise? How can that be? The answer has to be redistribution. It has to be that other people are getting less because other people look bad in comparison to you when you get more education. All right, so this brings me then to my hack. If the main problem with what's really going on with the college is that people are showing off to employers, if throwing money on the system just increases the amount of showing off without really having much effect on what people can do or their contributions, then the obvious solution is to go backwards. And rather than trying to make college more accessible, cheaper, easier, instead try to make it more expensive, harder, right? Basically to turn back the clock to a time when going to college was something that was unusual. And you're saying, well, that would be terrible. Then a lot of people couldn't afford to go. That's actually the whole point of my hack, right? The whole point is to discourage people from going on the theory, which could be wrong, but which I am very happy to defend, that it is not enriching society to any significant extent when more people to go to college, but rather what we're doing is just raising the amount of education you have to have. So the way that I often explain this to my students is, if people listen to me, a lot of you wouldn't be here. However, you also wouldn't need to be here. So you would be saving years of your life. And of course, if you love listening to me, that's great. But I know a lot of you don't really love listening to me. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just start your lives 2 years earlier, 4 years earlier? Now, finally, to bring this around to hack. So hack is normally supposed to be a very clever and creative idea. My idea is neither clever nor creative. It's just it's something that is so straightforward, so ham-fisted. It's kind of along the lines of being in pre-Columbian Central America and saying, how we use wheels on toys? How about we use wheels on bigger things? That's my hack. All right. So similarly, what I'm saying is, how we don't subsidize things that are socially wasteful usually? All right. Well, why don't we cut back the subsidies on the socially wasteful thing? Again, you may say, well, that's not very constructive. Well, when you see someone who is wasting their money, should you really need to package your advice to stop wasting their money with something constructive? If you see someone spending $1,000 a week on astrology, should you also say, stop spending money on astrology and here's something else you should spend the $1,000 on? Seems to me that there's a great deal of value in just saying stop spending money on astrology. And that's my hack. Thank you. Do we do Q&A or do I just? No. Okay.
You'll be accosted
Okay.
in the hallway.
All right.
Thanks, Brian. And now we are moving on to our second hack, which is cracking the credit hour. And this is going to be presented by Amy Leighton, who works with Kevin as the Deputy Director here at New America of our Education Policy Program. Amy?
That's a fun presentation to follow. So I will say that my hack is probably similar but completely different. I think I agree with a lot of the diagnosis of the problem and around learning, but it's really the solution that I think is a problem. I do think that higher education has become too much of an empty signaling mechanism, and it's becoming one that's increasingly necessary and too expensive. But I don't think the answer is to have the government stop paying for education. I think the real issue is trying to get the government and then other payers to actually pay for learning rather than seat time. So if we're talking about paying for the same old stuff, agreed, we don't need to pay for the same old stuff. Let's pay for something new. Let's actually pay for learning. Right now, the federal government spends about $150 billion a year in federal financial aid. That's Pell Grants, loans to help students go to college. This is the lifeblood of colleges and universities. If that money were turned off tomorrow, the vast majority of colleges would shutter their doors. But as with anything, you get what you're paying for. And right now, we're paying for time, and we're not paying for learning. And we're paying for time in the form of the credit hour. Now, I assume we have lots of people in the room who have experienced credit hours, taken credit hours. Yes? Yeah, all right, credit hours, good. So it seems innocuous enough. You collect a certain amount, you pass go, you turn in your 120, you get your degree, and you go on your way. Seems harmless enough. But actually, I think the credit hour really has contributed to some of the larger quality issues that we have in higher education. But in order to sort of understand how this seemingly innocuous credit hour has affected higher education, we have to go back to the original purpose of the credit hour. So we have to go back to the turn of the 20th century to Andrew Carnegie, the philanthropist, steel magnate, who was really worried about the fact that professors couldn't save enough money for retirement. So he did what anybody else would do, and he took $10 million and he created a free pension fund, and he sort of set it up. But in order, even though he was very generous, that's a lot of money, free pensions is a very generous offer, he wasn't just going to give it out to anyone. There had to be standards for who would qualify. So the way that they determined who was going to qualify were full-time faculty, and full-time faculty were defined as faculty who taught 12 credit units, which each unit being equivalent to 1 hour of faculty-student contact a week, and that was a full-time faculty. So 12 credit hours. For those of you who graduated or went to college more recently than I did, do you know how many credit hours you need to take to be a full-time student? Anybody remember? 12. 12 credit hours is full-time student. It was never meant to be about students. If you are a full-time student and you take 12 credit hours a semester, it will take you 5 years to graduate. It was not supposed to be for students. It was supposed to be for anything except for determining faculty workloads. But we took this very specific faculty workload measure and we turned it into all of these other things because it was easy. And one of the most dangerous things is it's become a proxy for learning. And in the very beginning, the Carnegie Foundation said, don't do that. There will be a temptation. Please, please, please. This is not about learning. But it's standardized, it's easy to count, and so we ended up using it for a bunch of things. But it isn't standardized. It has this illusion of being standardized. But if it were really standardized, you would be able to transfer credits fully amongst colleges, between colleges, across state lines, because an hour in DC should be the same as an hour in Alaska, but it's not. Colleges routinely reject credits taken at other colleges. They even reject credits in their own college. If you take Harvard's summer school courses, you can't transfer those to Harvard. If higher education doesn't trust its own credits, why should anybody else? we probably shouldn't. I mean, I really appreciate some of the comments earlier and Brian's comments about the quality of higher education. I think we study after study is showing that students, graduates, have learned shockingly little. There was a maybe the last 6 years, study by the U.S. Department of Education that showed that 69, almost 70% of college graduates couldn't do basic tasks like comparing opposing editorials. These are college graduates. There's lots and lots of studies. The findings are echoed by employers. I think Jeff said earlier, 87% of CEOs are like, what are we getting with these college graduates? So I think it's pretty clear that there is the correlation between time served and learning achieved isn't really as high as we'd like to think. So we have a credit crisis. We have students who've earned credits who can't cash them in. We have students who have credits who haven't learned a lot. And then on the flip side, we have millions of people who've learned a ton, but because they've learned it in the wrong place or the wrong time, it doesn't count. So they might have taken a MOOC, they might have earned a badge, they might have gone to Code Academy, maybe they took some online classes at Khan Academy, but this learning doesn't count. We need to stop counting time, and we need to start counting learning. So that sounds sort of simple in practice, and we have all these little pieces. How do we put them together? Well, I think the future's going to look different in 5 and 10 years, but right now there's some emerging models where you can sort of take it all in one program in an institution. One example is Southern New Hampshire University's College for America. This is a fully online, competency-based program aimed right now at working adults. Well, it may not always be, but there's nothing public yet. So this is an extremely low-cost program. It's like $1,200 for 6 months. And in that 6 months, it's like a buffet. It's all you can eat, all you can learn in 6 months. And there was a woman earlier who talked about courses and why are we thinking about courses as sort of being the vehicle or the container, thank you, that we put things in. And College for America doesn't have courses. They don't have any courses at all. What they do is they basically said, okay, we're doing an Associate of Arts degree, and we want to figure out what does that mean? Like, forget how many credits you need. What do we expect somebody who has this degree to know and be able to do? And then we're going to sort of map backwards, and we're going to say, okay, so how do we set up some tasks and projects for you to be able to demonstrate competency in those areas? And so that's what they did. There are no courses. And this is where the sort of really fun and interesting part that's really enabled by technology comes in. This allows the learning to be individualized and self-paced. So you can go in, and as soon as you demonstrate your mastery of the competency, you move on, no matter if it takes you a week or a year. And this is a really critical difference between some of the competency-based models and the time-based models, is that in traditional time-based higher education, time is held constant. We are all taking the 15-week course, and we're sort of, sitting there for 15 weeks, texting, doing whatever. And the learning is variable. So I may come in, I may already know this stuff, and I don't really learn a lot. Or I may be so in over my head that I'm learning just barely the minimum in order to pass that course. Or, it could be that there's sort of some combination of the two. Whereas, think about graduate school. The amount of time, people learn at very different rates. The amount of time it took me to really understand econometrics, some of the econometrics course, some of my quantitatively gifted friends could have taken 10 courses in that period of time, but they had to sit and slog through it with me. So in this model, we have time is variable and learning is held constant. So lots of exciting things happening there. But the problem is that these types of models don't fit in well with the credit hour, again, which everything is based on. And it makes it really hard for these types of programs to receive federal financial aid. And again, without federal financial aid, things sort of fall apart. So unless we have that, these programs are going to remain one-offs. They're going to be really hard to scale. But the good news is this hack, which is cracking the credit hour, it's starting to crack. So just last year, and I see Hal Plotkin from the U.S. Department of Education here, he'll be on a panel later. The U.S. Department of Education gave Southern New Hampshire's College for America, they gave them basically a waiver from the credit hour and said, you can give financial aid based on learning. First in the country to do that. Since then, several other programs have been approved and more are in the pipeline. That's really exciting. The President of the United States said he wants to create these sort of experimental laboratories where more colleges can come and sort of play with the idea of paying for learning with financial aid rather than time. Congress has been introducing bills, I don't know, not left and right, but has been introducing bills and talking about introducing bills left and right that would create more room for experimentation and competency-based education. So this is all very exciting. So moving away from the time-based credit hour opens up huge potential for the scale, distance, and cost issues that Kevin was talking about earlier. But I think most importantly, and I think the conversations around tech and ed tech tend to focus on those issues, but I think the most important issue here is quality. If, as Kevin said, making learning visible is one of the key challenges here, I think this is where competency-based education has a real advantage. If we want higher education not to be about empty signaling, as Brian was talking about, then we need much more transparency about what courses, degrees, and credentials actually mean. And that is why we need to hack and crack the credit hour.
Thank you, Amy. And as a former editorial writer, I love that the study you referenced where comparing, contrasting editorials was considered a basic task. I love that. So now we're going to have a conversation. We're going to unbundle a little bit this theme of unbundling that we have been discussing all day in terms of, Catherine, if you're in the next conversation, why don't you start getting mic'd up? But there's been a lot of discussion about what's happening in terms of the unbundling of courses, credit hours, degrees, the intermediary institutions. To what extent can we continue to unbundle, or should education continue to unbundle given the expectations and needs of the employers who, as Brian mentioned, in some ways continue to be the drivers of the system if college is seen as a series of hoops that prospective employees have to jump through. So to help us with the unbundling task, we have a discussion that's going to be moderated by Catherine Mangu Ward. Catherine is a Future Tense Fellow here at New America, as well as the managing editor of Reason magazine. Catherine?
So we're just going to kind of have an open discussion here about the question of whether or not a degree still matters in the tech economy. Quick introductions. Brian Kaplan has already made himself known to you as a person who shies away from controversy and generally does not like to provoke people. He's also a professor of economics at George Mason. I think we mentioned his book, The Case Against Education. He is also the author of The Myth of the Rational Voter and Selfish Reasons to Have More Kids. So again, very shy. Don't let him get upset with the controversy. Michael Gibson, Langley is the head of operations of Code Academy. And Michael Gibson is the vice president for grants at the Thiel Foundation and a policy associate at Clarium Capital Management. I will note that Brian and Michael have both written for me, and we've written about you. So if you want to get on the bandwagon, you can talk to me afterward about Reason magazine. So let's just start with a very, very fast lightning round. I promise you get to use as many words as you want later. But first, each of you, does a degree still matter? Yes, no?
Absolutely. Degrees. Yeah.
You can have a whole sentence. Go ahead.
I'll just, absolutely.
Oh, look at that. Okay.
Yes and no.
Cheating.
For professions where we can measure performance most directly, the degree will become increasingly irrelevant.
Should a degree still matter?
Should. In a perfect world, it wouldn't matter very much. If I were advising an employer about whether or not they should hire on the basis of credentials, I would probably say, yeah, you have to keep doing it because you're probably going to have some serious problems if you don't, given the way that given the way that good workers currently behave.
It depends on the preferences of the individuals who want to make the decision whether or not how they want their life to unfold, and depends on the preferences of the employers in terms of what kind of skills, what kind of employees they want.
I think it shouldn't matter.
All right, let's start there. Why shouldn't a degree matter?
Well, just because it seems to be an indirect measurement of a bundle of skills, attitudes, and dispositions, and it's very imperfect in that way. So if we can somehow not just unbundle education, but unbundle our way of measuring these things or even improving them, I think that would be more important. So yes, obedience matters. Yes, sitting in a seat from 9 to 5 without disrupting others matters. But maybe there's a cheaper way to do it than $60K a year, right?
Brian, can you talk a little bit about sort of more broadly, obviously we've already had your hack there, but could you talk a little more broadly about why this sort of signaling function is so important, is so irreplaceable, or difficult to replace at least?
Right. Well, so the easy answer is that government at all levels puts $1 trillion on the scale of the status quo every year. So that probably has some effect in locking in the system as we know it. But on a deeper level, so obviously, even without any government money, I think we would still see a system that is much smaller, but still fairly closely resembles the one that we have today. A big part of the reason is that part of what you're signaling is conformity. Conformity is based on convention, and conventions are inherently hard to change. Like, why is it that a suit is the high status thing to wear to a business meeting? Why couldn't it be kimonos? Well, I don't know. There's no really good answer to that other than other people don't do it. We haven't done it that way for a long time, and it's not going to change. Right? And I think that college is very much like that. It's something that, even more than before in our society, something that people are supposed to do. People understand that this is socially expected. Once that expectation is around, employers are very nervous about hiring someone who seems promising who doesn't actually meet those standards. Or again, more likely, it's not so much that employers get nervous as they throw away your application before they even talk to you. So you don't even get your foot in the door to get a chance to, as I said, put your foot in your mouth.
We have angry head shaking, which is always a good sign.
Not angry head shaking per se. I'd say two things. I think on the demand side for labour in tech, I think what Michael's saying on this side is that what we look at ultimately in technology jobs isn't ultimately about credentials and degrees. When you say that a lot of CVs get tossed aside because people don't meet the paper requirement, in tech it's not really true. The first thing we look at actually is what is your GitHub? That's the repository for code that people have. If you're a designer, we look at your design portfolio. Those are the true things that really matter and the true signals that we care about. And the second point in terms of around conformity, again, I think to some degree that's true. Yeah, we do want people with a work ethic who will turn up to work and who won't, toss the chairs and go crazy. But in technology as well, I think you'll find that a lot of the big innovators are people who have historically been non-conformists. They've been people who have gone outside, the realm of, conventional thinking and have had those extraordinary gains and stuff. So I think to sort of say that that's the best signal, it's limited.
There's a little ambiguity in the name of this panel, right? Because it's in the tech economy, and the question is, does that mean, in the tech industry, or does that mean in our sort of tech-dominated economy? I mean, my sense is that people who work in tech are kind of proud of the fact that they would rather look at what you've done than what your credential is, that this is something that they consider themselves sort of exceptional for. Would you say that's true, and what about the broader economy?
Look, I'd say that, I'll start with the tech economy, obviously that's where, I come from. We ultimately care about productivity. We ultimately care about trying to predict and find the employees which will do the best work for us. And whichever mechanism provides that best signal, be it an MIT degree or be it your contribution to open source projects for the last 10 years or whatever that predictors is, we'll take. So I think if it's good enough for Google, if you sort of read Tom Friedman recently been talking about how Google have changed their approach to hiring and where the signal for college degrees historically, which was important to them, now is a lot less important. They're looking at people who come via alternative mechanisms. That's increasingly important for us in the tech industry because of the shortages. And I think those shortages have shown us that traditional predictors of talent and productivity have not been the best way, and that there are alternative predictors which are as good, if not better. For the broader economy, I think it's going to be an evolutionary process, right? I think what the tech industry has shown is that you can find ways to evaluate without a degree, and if that sort of slowly transform to other industries, that could be a good thing.
If you look at some of the other parts of the economy, or actually maybe another way to say this is look at the top 10 schools and what their graduates go on to do. By and large, they're all becoming management consultants or iBankers. And these are the jobs where imagination is not a virtue, conformism is. And so I think, yes, as that path will hold for graduates of Harvard who aren't working in startups, I don't know, maybe that will continue for years to come. One thing I'd like to ask Brian is, shouldn't you, given your arguments, shouldn't you suggest that we tax people who go to college?
That is a great question, and the answer is, if higher education were 100% signaling, then that absolutely follows. The only concern, well, the two main concerns are, first of all, you would wind up taxing some genuine learning. You wind up taxing learning computer science or engineering, along with taxing philosophy or political science or sociology. But then the deeper problem is just that I think government has messed things up enough, and to say, well, just go and mess it up in a different way. I think this is a case where it's better just to separate government from the industry rather than telling them to go and take it over in a different way. So, but yes, that would actually follow just in terms of usual economics. I'm very happy with the idea, or very open to the idea that the tech industries are very different from most from the rest of the economy. And this is certainly the idea that my dad instilled in me. So he's a PhD in engineering, and his whole worldview was, there are two kinds of people in the world: PhDs in engineering and taxi cab drivers. Which one do you want to be? Still very confused at how I managed to pull this off, but. However, in any case, out of all the people that I've ever talked to in the tech industry, when I really get them off the record to find out, well, how does your industry really work? The main things that I hear from them are twofold. First of all, we have become more and more credentialist over time. It's really in the 70s and 80s that you could get a good job in computer science without being a high school dropout. That is much more the usual story. So it's much more expected now that a good computer scientist will get a regular undergraduate degree and show that he is a successful person who also does computer science, rather than say special kind of thing. He's just a computer scientist. And furthermore, the other thing that I've heard from people who are in the industry is, yes, there are these alternate routes of getting great jobs at high tech firms, but the bar is vastly higher. If you want to get hired at Google by winning a programming contest, you have to be like one of the 5 best people in the country. Whereas if you want to get a job at Google by having a bachelor's degree in computer science, then maybe you only need to be one of a few, maybe 300 best people in the country. So it's the bar. So while tech does have these backdoor approaches, and that's great, they are not realistic for most people, and they're even today, by most accounts, they're not an important part of the market. You may have seen a different side of it, but what fraction of people that you actually ever personally work with did not go to college? In CS, not.
And actually, just to kind of add to that question, isn't part of what Codecademy does offer just a different kind of a credential, right? It's not a degree in the sense that we were used to thinking of it, but can you just talk a little bit about how credentialing might still be part of it, but function?
Yeah, so I think the notion of credentialing obviously comes from a direct or indirect measure, as Michael was referring before, about the quality of what you can do or the quality of your skill. So we rely a lot on indirect measures of credentialing based on, Harvard or your university being a trusted source or authority that, Brian or Michael Lang did the work or turned up enough over 4 years, and that we should trust, that they're good. For Codecademy, I think the main thing that we're trying to do is I want to take the risk out of learning for people and take out the investment for people. There's no money up front. You come to the site, it's free to learn. Do whatever you want, learn as much as you can, get some skills. But the true proof of whether or not you have learned anything or can do anything is your portfolio, is what code you have written, what sites you have built, what applications you can deliver to the marketplace. And so ultimately, what we're trying to do is show that, no cost up front, get some real skills, get some real proof of your abilities based on what we can produce, and use that as the best signal to the employers.
I'd say, just to follow up on Brian's comment, it's tricky to think about the past. Yes, I have a college degree, but I also used to use Windows 95 and a phone attached to a wall. So I think technology will change things in the future, more in the direction.
So my story about technology is if technology was going to disrupt higher education, it would have happened in the 70s when the VCR came along. The VCR, videotape is an excellent substitute for most professors. And yet, that did not happen. Sometimes a professor will take a day off, or would take a day off by putting a videotape into a machine and letting the students watch it while he would read the newspaper. But the VCR did not have any significant effect on higher education. And I honestly think that the other innovations people are talking about are not going to change much either. I'm open to the idea that there's going to be niche markets, or that there may be people who currently don't go to normal colleges that will wind up doing the alternatives. But it's not going to bring the system down. It's not going to be like Napster or anything like that. So I want to say, I wish you were right. Well, there's, as a philosopher, I wish you were right. right? As a tenured professor at a public university, I don't really wish you're right, or I don't really, in that sense, I don't hope, selfishly speaking, I don't hope it happens, but just when I just look around and see the how rigid the system is, and especially how harshly employers judge someone who doesn't go to college, right? And again, like the harsh judgment is not to the point, not where the employer looks you in the eye and says you're no good. It's where they look at a piece of paper and throw it away before even giving you a chance. Which again, if you understand the time constraints that they're under, it's obvious why they do it. If you get 300 applications for one job, you're not going to carefully read 300 applications. You're going to be looking for reasons to throw them away. And right now, the first people who get in line to do something unconventional are shooting themselves in the foot. Of course, it might be that the unconventional thing is better than nothing, in which case that might still be good for you and there might be a market for them. But if you can get into a traditional four-year college and you're likely to succeed, and if you say, well, should I go and do this, you'll just go and do something online that people haven't heard of yet, I would say no. Actually, one of the things, so my colleague Alex Tabarrok has actually spent the last 10 years worrying that technology is going to put us out of a job. And my big answer to him is, so Alex, what are you going to say when your son says, I want to go to an online college? And I know he's going to say, no, you're going to do the normal thing because that's what's high status and that's what's going to open doors, and this other thing, maybe sometime in the distant future it's going to change, but like by the time that your kid is ready to go to college, I didn't think so, and he didn't. I know that I've got Alex beat when he doesn't respond. So
Michael, one of the things that you do, one of the things that the Thiel Foundation does is, I guess on Brian's side of the ledger is $1 trillion federal dollars, but you do occasionally try to kind of incentivize the other choice. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we run a program called the Thiel Fellowship. We give $100,000 grants to 20 individuals under the age of 20 to leave school and work on projects. Some people start companies. I think maybe that's that's a important side of the tech economy that we haven't really addressed. Yes, it may be hard to even get a job at Google without a college degree, but you can start a company without anyone's permission and without a degree. So startups generate a lot of innovation in the tech economy, and startup founders do not need a degree to start a business. And we're going to see more and more of that, I think, because it's just, in the last 10 years or so, that's become a viable career path, and more people seem to be pursuing it.
Let's take some questions from the audience. We have one eager beaver all the way in the back, so I guess maybe we get that guy a mic.
Hi, is this working? Yes? My name's Kevin McClure. I'm an assistant professor of higher education, and I'm interested to learn how the signaling model accounts for a lot of well-documented research showing that there are positive externalities to universities. So this idea of it being socially wasteful is interesting to me because it has huge public policy ramifications, right? So we know that 80% of our students are attending public higher education institutions. And when we're talking about learning here, we're not just learning about coding. We're teaching students how to write. I mean, we're talking about some very rudimentary skills here that are necessary to be good citizens, to participate in democracy. So I was wondering if you could answer that very specific question about the model, the signaling model, but then also comment on this bigger idea of learning and the type of learners that we have in higher education. Thank you so much.
Okay.
While Brian scribbles notes.
Can I add a
Yes,
thought to
yes.
that? Or?
Yeah, go. Everybody go for it. Lang first.
Okay, so in regards to your bigger question, sure, Red Code Academy, we only teach coding. There are a lot of other parts of education which are very important. The reading, the lifelong learning, the great classics, all that sort of stuff, no doubt. What I would say is this though, if you go to college and you do, a degree and then you come out, like 50% of college graduates, and you're unemployed or underemployed, you're not really in a great state or position to continue with lifelong learning. What I'd say the best condition that creates and facilitates lifelong learning is you're actually in a job which is you find meaningful and that you enjoy and that challenges you. So I'd say that we all hold this ideal notion. I'm guessing a lot of us here enjoyed great college educations, and we all have benefited from the classics and reading things that have expanded our minds and helped us in our professional jobs. But for the large majority of people who went to college, I think there's a great self-selection here that we here say college is really great. But we're presupposing that this is the one sort of path for everyone. And we've got to recognise the heterogeneity that exists within the population. That for a lot of people, that's not the main game, or not the main way for them to engage and be a better citizen or get those social valuable things.
Mike?
I think a lot of colleges and universities are hedge funds with
Sports fields.
sports fields and dating sites, and those are extremely valuable. Country clubs have positive externality effects, but remember that they depend on exclusivity for the good they provide. And I guess none of us up here have really addressed this issue, but I don't think technology will disrupt the envy market. I think that will continue, and colleges are going to provide the good that allows that.
Yes, so in response to your question, first of all, how can the signaling model account for positive externalities? The answer is it's quite possible that the signaling model is true, but education also has some positive externalities. So that is entirely possible. So, for example, it could be that the reason why students are going is to signal the labor market, and that's why it pays. And yet maybe it makes them to better. Maybe education turns you into a better voter, and thereby gives you a better society. So that's perfectly possible. Essentially, what the signaling model is saying is that there's a big negative externality against which we should be weighing this against whatever the positive externalities other people are pointing to. I can also say, though, that I have read very widely in the literature on the externalities of education, and I'm not convinced that the positive externalities are there. In fact, I would say, so some of the best evidence, I think, is if you just take a look at the payoff that nations get from education versus the payoffs that individuals get. And there, in general, what you see is that the payoff at the national level seems much smaller than the payoff at the individual level, just as the signaling model would predict. So if you take a look at the work on let's see, it's a little technical, but the work on what's called the macro-Mince return, which basically thinks about countries as being analogous to individuals and sees how much does GDP go up when their average education citizens go up. Usually there you get something like a 2% increase in income versus a 10% for 2% for countries versus 10% for individuals. And what's striking, you may have heard about Lance Pritchett's stuff on how little learning goes on in third world countries. So third world schools are terrible. They fail to teach basic stuff. And yet you can also see that in the third world, the private payoff to education, if anything, is larger than it is here, which again fits very well with the signaling model. In terms of learning, here I would say that I'm interested that you are a professor of higher education, because I spend a lot of time trying to get economists to read more research on by education researchers. Because economists generally just take a look and see people who go to college make more money, therefore they must be learning a ton of useful job skills. I'm saying, well, why don't we actually go and read the people who measure what people learn and find out what they're learning? So my take on the actual empirical literature on what people are learning at most levels is what I call my 3 iron laws of pedagogy. First of all, students actually learn very little. So if you give students a final exam, you will notice, my God, I talked about this stuff for hours, and a lot of students still don't understand it, even at the end of the semester. Like the very day when it matters most in their life to understand labor economics, they still have at best a very rudimentary understanding of labor economics. So first iron law, students actually don't learn very much. Second iron law is that students forget what they learn very rapidly. So it is totally standard for someone who knows the material on the day of the final exam to barely remember it a year later. And the third finding, which to me is the most striking, is that people are very bad at applying what they learn in class to practical situations. So there's this whole literature in educational psychology on transfer of learning, where they actually teach people a skill, and then they give them a problem which is structurally the same but superficially different. And people are very bad at actually applying what they learned, unless, of course, you go and say, use what I just taught you on problem A to solve problem B. And this is striking because in the real world, you don't have voiceover telling you to go and apply trigonometry from 10th grade. So people are actually very bad at applying what they learn in school. Because it brings us to the question, how is people can do their jobs at all if they're learning so little? The answer is learning is highly specific, and most people learn by doing, not by hearing lectures. People learn how to do their jobs by being given a job and then copying people. That's the actual way most people learn how to do a job. It's not by sitting listening to lectures from someone who doesn't even know anything about the job you're ever going to do.
Another question? Yeah, down in the front. Wait for the mic.
Well, I have this was a very stimulating conversation, and given what you just said, shouldn't we be changing the model and what we call a degree, really, instead of just saying, really, does a degree still matters, and shouldn't the education system or the colleges or the academia change how we really define a degree and what is the purpose of a degree and how we teach. I'm curious because the last panel and this panel seems still to think that the professor is the source of knowledge. And it is a very interesting, and I'm sorry, I'm probably surrounded by scholars here, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, seriously.
I've done that already. So.
But it's very curious to me to see that I think that the role is not evolving, and maybe that's where we should start this conversation. I don't know, the thoughts.
Well, I think the big elephant in the room is that I think we all can acknowledge the definition of a university, the definition of degree conferring institutions has radically changed, over the last 20, 30, 50 years, right? Institutions which previously were not called colleges or called, tertiary educations has changed massively. And so, your point about, well, what does a degree actually represent and what does it actually signal? Who knows, right? I think there's a great book called What a University is For, and sort of tracking through the history of, how certain bodies which were previously allowed to confer degrees and how that's really changed is really then sort of in some ways devalued as this increased supply in the market for what a degree means.
Yeah. What I would say is if you make me the definition czar, I will redefine education very quickly. Unfortunately, there is no such person, and maybe it's fortunate there is no such person, but it's unfortunate it's not me. So it is not in my power to redefine education. It's something that is out there. The definition is common property. Everyone has their idea of what it is. Right now, we have converged on this convention of thinking of formal traditional schooling as being what education is. And I think it does matter that government at all levels puts $1 trillion on the scales of the standard system. So I think that we would have a more open system if there were not such a big bias in favor of what we have. But so just to really just become more realistic about what education really is about. For most students, it's not primarily about learning, right? Rather, it's about having a good time and getting a job after you graduate.
To follow up on this point as well, I think if you look at countries like say Germany, where there are very strict definitions of what it means to be a teacher, to qualify at a professor level, and all those sorts of things. I'm not so sure though, having a definition czar of Brian Kaplan would be the right way as well. It's a super regulatory approach either. So it's a difficult mix, I think.
And that's actually, I'm going to let you jump in a second, but just quickly, that's something that Code Academy has actually struggled with a little bit, right? That, just the idea that, who qualifies as an instructor in that environment? And can you talk about how you've solved that or how that shook out?
Yeah, exactly. So, Code Academy, we're actually a platform, right? So that means not only can people just come to the site and do the courses, we have a tool, a course creator where anyone can come and produce content and teach stuff. And so our idea is that, why is it limited to people? Who defines who should be the instructor? Like you were saying, our professor is really the only source of this knowledge. Why can't there be a wide range of other people who can potentially teach others? And we've had over 100,000 people, start creating content to share with their fellow learners.
Michael?
Yeah, just one further thought is college is an industry like any other. And what drives innovation is trial and error, and that's brought about by new entry in the market. But right now there are a lot of barriers to entry to creating new colleges. Just look at the accreditation process. It takes years and a lot of money. So policy-wise, yeah, it would be great if we could lower those barriers.
I would say that we don't actually have to create new colleges or new institutions, right? I think what we're trying to do at Code Academy, I think all the other online education systems, it's not really about trying to compete with having college fields and dating sites and that sort of stuff. It's alternative ways that people can get educated, learn skills for free. And then, this will be a way that we can sort of take away some people who perhaps recognize that, going to college, the investment doesn't make sense for them and stuff, and there's an alternative path.
Did I see a story in the last month or two about places like Code Academy facing stricter regulatory oversight?
That wasn't Code Academy. It was on like dev boot camps, training programs, yeah.
Although that is an interesting kind of relevant question, right? That I think it was in California.
Yes.
They wound up with a situation where as soon as an entity tried to offer something that looked a bit like it might be a formal credential in the way that colleges offer formal credentials, regulators did get nervous about it, and they said, well, we need you to register all your professors and make sure they meet our definitions for the state. And so there definitely is, I think, a sort of a pushback, but not just the sort of subsidy side, but also the regulatory side.
But Michael, I mean, do you really think that education is an industry like any other? I mean, I would say, if someone said, is the suit industry like any other? I'd say, no, the suit industry is quite different from other industries, because a lot of the reason why people are wearing the suits is to impress other people. It's not primarily, people are not primarily wearing suits for their own comfort. You know, there is actually, there are some distinctive reasons why people buy suits that are not common to a lot of other kinds of clothing. And I'd say, education is also very distinctive in that you could have something that was better in a long list of ways, but if it was not recognized, if it was unusual, people would be very reluctant to do it. So I mean, like say, here are some unusual things about education that I have noticed. You might say, so first of all, students seek out easy A's. All right, now what's so weird about that? Well, they prefer professors who give easy A's, professors who teach them a lot of job skills. You can even go to ratemyprofessor.com and you see they don't have any rating for usefulness of the content. They rate you for interestingness, hotness. You get chili peppers, but there's no actual rating.
How many do you have, Brian?
I have 0 chili peppers. Last time I checked.
Maybe you need a sharper suit.
Yeah, that would help. So, like when you look at this, you tell a student, look, you'll learn a ton of this in this course, but the professor will give you an F. Do you want to do it? No, I don't. I would rather go and give the professor who will give me an A, who doesn't ask anything of me and doesn't in any way enhance my job skills. So that that's a sign that there's something different about this. So, although my favorite one is students cheer when you cancel class. If you were hiring someone to rebuild your roof and they said, hey, you know what, we're going to take your money today and we're not going to work on your roof, you would not go, yay! And yet students do actually cheer when you take their tuition money. You don't get a refund, the professor cancels class, and goes to Hawaii and gives a talk, and you don't get, you pay your tuition, you don't get the learning, and yet the students are happy. Why not? Why are they happy? Because they know that if the professor teaches less, you don't have to know as much for the final exam, and all that counts is your relative ranking. But even my sons have known this since second grade when they cheer for snow days, but are paranoid about missing school. And I didn't want to lead the witness. I said, so why? What's the difference? And they said, well, you don't get penalized if no one goes to school. Then it doesn't matter whether you go to school. Aha! So you understand the signaling model just as I think. I think actually the signaling model is out of all the social science I know, it's the thing that I believe from the earliest age. So I think from 5 years old, I realized there's a whole lot of stupid stuff that they make me do, and if I don't do these things, then I will suffer. And if I go along and pretend to care, then I'll have a great life. And it's worked out just as I expected.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I think the least surprising revelation from this panel is that Brian's kids understand signaling. Thank you very much, and thank you everyone for.
That was great.